Hey everyone, I like to learn about the real world by collecting miniatures, and very often deformed miniatures. So the Me-262 here was the very first military fighter jet made by the Germans here, just reading Wikipedia. So development in 1939 started, but it didn't really start flying for the Luftwaffe until 1944, because Goring and Hitler were, I don't know, changing his plans, and also shortages of metal and fuel and all that stuff. But it did work pretty well as a recon, experimental night fighter, and light bomber. Let's see here. It says here 542 Allied aircraft were shot down with this jet plane, which makes sense because the thing was really fast, I assume. So 1,430 of them were built, and then statistics. Let's see. So length of over 10 meters, over 12 meters wide. And then speed, 900 kilometers an hour, 560 miles per hour. That's kind of like a commercial airline nowadays. A range of only 1,000 kilometers, though. But I guess, yeah. Well, anyways, guns, rockets, bombs. All right, so that's all I care to learn about. And so here is a cartoon version of the thing. We'll compare it to photos later on after I finish this thing. So on eBay, you can find a lot of deformed planes and deformed vehicles in general. If you look up like cute version, you'll find a lot of stuff. And I usually review Top Gun Chen stuff, but now we have one called Dong Model Studio, and I asked this person if they sell finished models, and the person's like, no. So this person doesn't have time. I'm sure the person has a full-time job, but the person just likes, cute versions of things. So we have the thing called Stormbird and Kommando Nowotny. I assume it's one of these people? I don't know. Nice sturdy box. This box actually came in another box with bubble wrap, so it was well packaged, obviously. Alright. So instructions are nice. This is 3D printed if you haven't picked up on that. All that stuff. You're supposed to get A through H as far as the 3D print stuff. Pretty clear instructions, it looks like. And then there's English and Chinese. I'll have to read all that stuff later. Okay, well, it makes sense. Oh, cool, even color. So on the back side, yeah, what's nice is a separate frame from the clear window pieces. I don't know why every model kit company doesn't do that, but they make you paint mask off stuff. It's very annoying. Anyways, we have these different liveries. I don't know if I'm going to paint those dots or not. If I do, I'll have to do it with brushes. I don't trust myself with an airbrush to paint something that small. You never know. Alright, let's see what's in this box here. More bubble wrap. So a decal sheet, which is nice. Hopefully they're not super thin. I've had some issues with Hasegawa decals folding over themselves because they're so thin and delicate. I'm afraid they'll rip. Alright, 3mm small part, copper wire, black strap. This is probably the seatbelt piece, the harness. Yeah, there's a little metal wire, a little brown something, gray something. I'll figure that out later. Alright, so as you can see here, it's just kind of all puzzled together. So the main body, I'm going to leave it in the bags for now. I don't intend to make this right now. I just wanted to get a few certain parts to review a magic cutter, which is a ultrasonic cutter. So it's hollowed out. I gotta say, even just through this bag, you can just see all the detail of the panel lines. Look how many panel lines there are. Rivet marks. So it's actually pretty impressive. Oh, that's cool. Well, you got a little name tag. These are all print supports for my liquid vat resin printer. Okay. Now this is a little disturbing because in shipping a lot of the parts broke off, but you're gonna paint this stuff most likely anyways. It's also smart that this thing is gray. The resin that was used for these, at least. You should really prime your models. I've learned that mistake. A lot of paint will chip off easily. So this character is light, so kind of like a skin tone, close to it, so nice. Alright. We have the cockpit. Look at all the gauge details in there. The seats. There's a plain seat, and then there's one with a harness if you want to use that fabric. But I think I like the look of this more. Or it's possible that it could be two characters, maybe. This one's standing, but here's the window frames. Look how small they are. I like thin. Yeah, that is very thin. Ooh, boy, I'm afraid to even cut those off the runners, but maybe that ultrasonic thing will help. So very smart. These are just to protect the parts from shipping, these posts, right? To keep it from getting crushed. Looks like engine parts, maybe. SL caps or something, and these are the main engines with the wings already attached. I gotta say, everything looks pretty nice just through these bags. Alright, so yeah, here's the pilot sitting down. So that's why there's two different seats. Hopefully you could just swap them out easily. I don't think I really want the pilot's head sticking out myself, but so I might not even paint this one. Alright, so now here's the clear windows. Very nice. Okay. So Walter Nowotny is the paint scheme that I went with off of this thing, and I even bought a brand new airbrush with a .2 needle, but I had too much overspray spraying these little dots, so I just stopped and I ended up hand painting it. So the fading effect, I just can't do it. I'm not skilled enough. Now I really know that I shouldn't be airbrushing camo paint jobs. Uh, yeah, even on a big model like this. All right, so Walter Nowotny was a fighter ace, obviously, for the Luftwaffe in World War II, So he is credited with 250 aerial victories, meaning he downed 258 planes. What's crazy is he only flew 442 missions. So more than half of the missions this dude flew, he downed an airplane. that's crazy. That's impressive. That's really impressive. I mean, boy, it's not good for the people flying those airplanes, but you know, this is history. So, and because it is history, you know, I was a little hesitant to put the Nazi cross there or the swastika there, but it is history, so I went ahead with it. You know, since this is an actual livery by a fighter ace. And actually, this photo right here, one of these, it says Walter Nowotny here, so I don't know, maybe the dude in black, because he's got a funky hat. That could be him. And with over 1,000 of these made, there still are some planes today. This is from a photo from a museum, but it looks like a CGI rendering to me. I don't know. So I don't know if any of these actually fly. Leave a comment if you do know. Alright, so the model kit itself. Oh boy. I almost decided to abandon this build several times. So suffice to say, there's a lot of bad in this model kit. There's a little good in this model kit, and there's one awesome in this model kit. So I'm gonna go over all this stuff because this model kit was relatively expensive. You can only get it on eBay, to my understanding. It was like $60 or something like that. So, all right. So these instructions are absolutely fantastic. It's very impressive how good these instructions are when you're used to buying Chinese products. So this person clearly understands not only English, but this Chinese, of course. So, or maybe it's Taiwanese. It could be Taiwan. So I apologize because those are two totally different countries, right? With two totally different mentalities. So I'm looking at the instructions just to remind myself of what's going on because it took over 30, maybe 30 hours to build this thing. All right. So obviously you had the 3D printed parts. The parts themselves on these runners, some of the parts were so thin they broke just clipping off the runners. Like I would clip off the base of the runner itself. Let me try to find one. Alright. So I used these nippers here. And actually, I used a sonic cutter first because I know how delicate, these things are because I 3D print models myself. I have a liquid resin printer, an Elegoo nowadays. So that's what these are. This is not filament, it's not FDM. This is liquid vat resin kind of stuff. And this resin is very brittle, but it's high detail, so that's why you have such smooth surfaces. So actually, I'm going to discuss some of the parts here. This is all that's left over. First of all, this part's broken already just from shipping. Now, this is half of a goggle. So here's the other half, right? This bridge is so thin, it's crazy. So of course it broke during shipping. Alright, these are precision tweezers. What's crazier is the strap mechanism or whatever, the little loop here. You're supposed to run a piece of fabric through this strap, but look how thin it is. It is well under a millimeter. So I already knew from the get-go I wasn't going to have goggles on my character because this is so thin and so brittle. It's just ridiculous. I mean, it's nice that the person designed these, but I feel like maybe you shouldn't even bother. Or you gotta make them bigger or make them part of the actual head print. Alright, so that's one part. Let's see if I can find it, but here in the landing gear, let me show you this image here. This front landing gear requires this little shock or stabilizer piece, and so that's what this piece is right here, or part of it. And this is the part that broke just clipping off the runner that was supporting this in printing. So again, this is so thin yet so brittle because this high detail plastic. It's just not a good idea to do this. If it was a injection molded styrene model kit, no real company would ever make something this thin, most likely, unless it's like a, well, it's possible. But anyway, styrene has far more resilient properties from, it's not as brittle as this 3D printing stuff. All right, so that's an issue for sure. All right, now looking at, sorry, I'm gonna resituate the camera here. Originally I was thinking I was gonna have all the landing gear, but knowing this material, because I 3D print stuff myself, I know when I pull this airplane out for other comparisons or move it around my cabinet, I'm gonna break the landing gear off. Because here, this looks normal for something that's molded in an injection molding machine for a styrene or PVC or whatever, PET or whatever they use. But as a 3D printed part, no. This is going to break very easily, especially these. Look how thin these are. So the details are fantastically thin, but that doesn't make for a good product. If this is a realistic looking model kit, I could totally understand having super thin parts. But for a deformed airplane, they should be thick, because who cares? It's a deformed airplane, right? Yeah, to go for durability. So here's another thing. They came with 2 seats because one can hold a pilot, one cannot. This is the one that doesn't. But look, again, this is so thin. See, I barely touched it and it cracked. This one cracked off here. So as nice as this is, not durable at all. Look how, boy, the camera's having a hard time to even focus on something so thin. This little piece right here that holds the seatbelt, it's crazy thin. Maybe it's like 1/10 of a millimeter or 1/3 of a millimeter. It's not even a millimeter. I know that for sure. All right. Anyway, so great details. Yeah. So mold wise or design wise, I mean the wheel is nicely done. It's got nice tread, even like a little line for the, I guess, air pressure perhaps, but it's so crazy delicate. It's really insane. Alright, so I basically skipped the landing gear and took all these panels, and you'll see later, and I just put them in the bottom. So let me talk about that now. So here they are. They're quite gappy. I don't understand why they're this gappy. If you're gonna 3D print stuff, they could easily be tighter. But the main issue is there's no ledges inside of this open cavity here to rest these panels on. Oh, also, boy, I gotta show you another thing here. This panel, one of these panels, this rectangular one, it has 2 supports that are supposed to peg in right here. You can see these arrows pegging in. But those supports are so thin, there's no way you could actually have that model support those panels if you ever touch it again. Here, this is crazy. This is one of those supports. So this right here is 1/2 of the support that's supposed to peg into these 2 holes that are here. But look at how big this panel is, and look how big the support is. So how are you gonna hold a piece of plastic this big with a peg that small, right? If you glance that, just lightly brush this panel, that panel's gonna break off, because look how thin those are. It is just crazy. I hate to say it, because this obviously took a lot of work to design, but it's almost like this person has never built a model kit made by an actual model kit company, because the parts are just so delicate. Or it's almost like the person found a 3D file for a video game and then maybe thickened the parts and 3D printed it, but failed to do so on the other little details, because it takes time to modify 3D files and design them. Alright, so that's what's going on with some of those parts, not all of them. let me flip over here. So if you do decide to get this kit, and you do decide to put the landing gear mode on, I would suggest you avoid putting these panels on until the very end. Like, I mean, it's crazy. Or you're gonna have to just accept that you're gonna have to put some other plastic or glue in there to keep these panels in place. And also be very careful that that piece, it broke off just clipping it off the sprue. All right. So what else here? Oh yeah. So now the cockpit. First, the cockpit itself. Again, one of the reasons why I want to abandon this project is they're so thin, these pieces. There's 6 pieces, 3 window pieces and 3 frame pieces. But look how thin this is. I measured with calipers. The window is 0.35 millimeters in thickness. Most model kit canopies are well over a millimeter. You know, some of them are thicker than that because this is just so crazy. Look at this. It's I thought I was gonna break the frames so many times. I almost wanted to just give up, but I came so far. So it's a miracle this thing looks the way it does. Another thing, the only thing that really pegs in or doesn't peg in is this back frame. There's a ledge, so you can glue that in place. The front window has absolutely no locator pegs, no locating groove. It's resting here, and there's some air gaps. I put crazy glue in there to get it to sit there. Now, this is a nice feature, I guess, to have an open cockpit. And there's a little tube, I think it's heat shrink tube, and then a little wire going through, and you basically run that through, and then you glue the tube to the frame, and that's what's making this work. The one issue though is you can't actually get the pilot in here because the head is too big and the canopy is so delicate. If you try to push this head through, you're gonna break the frames. So that's kind of silly, right? I think the head should either be smaller, or really there should just be 2 canopies. One that's just completely closed, molded as 2 parts, 1 frame and 1 window, and then it could just rest on top. Or second, maybe just have the front. But all this stuff needs to be thicker. It is just so crazy delicate because this material, again, high detail resin. Here, I'll just show you. See how brittle this stuff is? It's like eggshells. Yeah, that's the best way I could describe making this model kit. It's like you're making a model kit made out of eggshells. So that obviously doesn't, you know, it's so easy for this stuff to break. Yeah, that's 3D printing high detail resins. There are strong resins, they just cost a lot of money, and so I totally understand why, you know, this person is going with the cheaper high detail resin. I just don't understand why so many of the parts are so delicate, as if they're like 1/400 scale. It's just, but the whole body is so durable. Alright, so actually that brings up the point about the body. The wings are separate pieces, and you're going to have to use some putty to fill in the gaps. There's no way around it. If I were the tail was a separate piece as well, and you definitely going to need some putty. This little rudder is a separate piece. I feel like it would have been better to cut off the nose and then you print this thing vertically this way with the supports down here. I think a lot of it could have been done that way, except for these would still have to be separate parts, and maybe the tail could have been cut off as well. Because this thing, you know, you just sand down the surface and you glue it, you adhere it on, and it's not so bad. You could have easily done the same with the nose and the tail, and so the wings wouldn't have these gaps in setting the angles and stuff of the wings. So that could have been done differently as well. This is the raw plastic. I'm too afraid to even paint it, or never mind touch the thing. Alright, so there's a nice little detail inside the cockpit. It's some sort of sighting mechanism, I guess. Oh, another thing inside that cockpit. So it's nice as a decal for the gauges, but the gauges themselves are three-dimensional. So when you put the decal on, there's a lot of air pockets behind, and you can see them still on this. So it would have been nice perhaps to have that thing flat instead of three-dimensional, or maybe a separate part for the front end of this cockpit so someone can choose if you want to use a decal or leave it three-dimensional and you have to paint the gauges individually. So that's a minor quibble. It's not so big of a deal. These little light sections, it did come with the pieces, but I lost one somehow because they're microscopic. Again, here's an extra sight window for that sighting box inside. So clipping it off, it probably flew across the room or something. So I used some UV glue. I just painted the red here, and then I put three drops of UV glue and 3 consecutive, UV blasts, and it actually does fit, conform to the wings. So on this side, it's actually better, I think, to use UV resin instead of the actual parts applied. Alright, so another issue is the canopy, the windows. They're 3D printed, and obviously they're way too thin, I think, but they're very sticky. So I thought maybe they weren't fully cured, so I put them in a UV box for a good several hours, and they were still sticky. So I don't know if these things were coated with some maybe floor shine or something, but that stuff is supposed to be waxy, right? Anyways, when I was sanding the 3D print supports off of these windows, the dust got onto the windows, and then because the thing was all sticky, I had to wash it a few times. And so you gotta be mindful of that. You might want to possibly clear coat them first before you sand the parts. Or what I did is I have this acrylic polish. You can get this off AliExpress. It says acrylic surface care cream. And pleasantly, it actually does help polish stuff. This looked it looked relatively opaque prior to using this. Like I did it like 3 or 4 times. This, I believe, has a chemical reaction with acrylic, melts it a little bit, and then you polish it. So this stuff is great, and it, so you can see a little bit into the cockpit where I couldn't before. All right, so again, the cockpit is nicely detailed. Let me get the flashlight down in there. Like even the foot pedals and stuff. There's a whole box of switches there, some levers, very cool. This little brace here, which is very delicate again. Surprised you didn't break that. So yeah, not much you can do about. I can't show you more of that, so I apologize, because anyways, it's a nicely detailed cockpit, so if you want to take the time, I didn't even take much time, and it still looks pretty nice. The decals themselves, you're gonna have to cut them individually. They're not, professional decals, meaning like they're not separate decals on a piece of paper. This piece of paper is an entire decal, so you're gonna have to take a hobby knife, or I use scissors, cut each decal out before you wet it. Otherwise, you're just gonna have a giant sheet. If I wet this, all this would be one piece of decal, and that's to be expected. I'm sure a real decal machine costs a lot of money. So I gotta say, these decals are very nice, actually, considering this is not a real company. It's an individual enthusiast, so very, very good. But they're very thin, so be careful. They will fold over themselves, which I had that happen. But I was lucky. I was patient, and all the decals are there. Little warning decals in German, which I thought was really cool. All right, so now another good thing is the panel gaps are nice and thick. This was clear coated twice. First I painted it with airbrushing. So first I primed it with Vallejo. Then I airbrushed it with Vallejo. Then I abandoned the airbrushing because it was so foggy. So then I hand painted it with Vallejo again. And then I clear coated it with Vallejo. And then I rattle canned it with just a rattle can matte, because Vallejo matte isn't very matte at all. So there's many layers of paint on this, and yet the panel gaps are still there because they're relatively big. I almost feel like they could even be bigger. So you can add some black paint wash in there if you wanted to, but I find that I don't need to because they're big enough, right? They look dark as it is. So I like that. That was really nice. This is just held on with some flexible glue because I broke it off 3 times. Just fondling the thing because again, the brittle plastic. There's 3 pegs holding this in place, but the first time I broke 1 peg, the second time, I don't know, just I used crazy glue on this side and I was lucky here. But yeah, it's really brittle plastic. Alright, so yeah, this is little cones that just held in with flexible glue. There's actually some fan details way in there. Yeah, so that's really nice. That's really cool actually. Up front and some ribs in the back. So hold on. Yeah, I just blew air through it. That's actually a hollow thing. So that's really neat. I haven't even bothered to add some gray here around the machine guns. You know, some sort of black weathering of the gun residue. I just wanted to get this video up before I break it. You know, what I'm really afraid of is breaking this off. It does come with this pitot tube, which is, oh wait, did it fall out? No, I think it's in. It fell out. There's supposed to be a metal tube in here. Hold on. Well, I found the metal tube and it flew off somewhere because the thing was microscopic. It's just gone. But that brings up another point. If I were to brush that tube, I'm pretty positive this 3D printed plastic would break off. So maybe it's for the best that it's not there. It's still at least sticking out. So I 3D printed my own base, and this black thing I'm touching came with it, which is nice. But I made my own little Dong Model Studio thing and just some stickers with the stats. Yeah, see, so there's the support structures that I'm used to. This is high detail resin also. It's very brittle. And then I drilled a 3mm hole in the bottom, and it's an acrylic 3mm rod. So I find that works pretty well because the acrylic has a lot of friction. But maybe the angle's a little bit down. Alright, so the last bit are the characters. So yeah, the pilots are nice and all that. It's just that this one doesn't fit if you actually have the whole canopy on the thing, which seems odd. It didn't come with eye decals. These came from like Hasegawa or something. So you're going to have to paint your own eyes or get your own eye decals. And then here we have a standing commander or something like that. Maybe this is also Nowotny. So very nice. This will be coming in handy, I think, when I do my Meg model tanks. Both of these. This looks like it could be a tank crewman, actually. So that's, yeah. So the characters are nice. But I almost feel like I would rather have just one small character fit inside that cockpit, and all this extra plastic make the cockpit stronger, make the landing gear stuff, all the little accessories on that plane stronger, thicker. In the event that anyone that 3D prints models and intends to resell them, I want to give you a little bit from my experience. So I've designed probably 7, 800, 1/400 scale models. This is the Ares 1B from the 2001 Space Odyssey. So this is 1/400 scale, meaning a human being is supposed to be inside that little black slot. And I've learned with this sort of, brittle plastic that you got to have everything or at least 0.8 millimeters thick. And if it's braced. If it's not braced, it's got to be well over 1 millimeter. 1 millimeter is pretty thin, actually. Once you get to around 2 millimeters, the stuff is, I think, sellable. So, another thing, when it comes to windows. Now, the reason why I don't sell or 3D print my own airplanes is because I've never reliably 3D printed a clear window. I bought some clear resin. It wasn't very clear, so that's why I don't do this sort of stuff. But I did 3D print this SUV design of mine. And I basically have thin packaging plastic in there. But you can see the frame of this vehicle is thick. Those are probably like 4 or 5 millimeter thick window frames. to hold the tension of the plastic in there. But maybe there you can see that sheet plastic is bowed inside of that surface. So if you want to have clear windows, just use packaging plastic, but they can only be curved in one axis, otherwise you'd have to go into vacuum forming. But vacuum forming tends to make the plastic a little bit cloudy as well sometimes. Not as bad as 3D printing, but I almost feel like this cockpit could have easily been made squarer and just use packaging plastic. Like these 3 windows could have been 3 separate pieces, and maybe 1, 2, 3. I don't know about this one. That's a tough one. But it's a comic airplane. If it's a cartoon airplane, it doesn't really have to look exactly like the real thing, right? So design choices could have been made. Alright, so that's my experience if you want to 3D print stuff and sell stuff. If you're going to resell stuff, it has to be durable enough to survive shipping. And if it's a model kit, it has to be pleasant enough or tolerable enough that people would want to make it. Alright, so looking at some other 3D printed planes. So Top Gun Chen is the king of 3D printed deformed airplanes in my opinion. This little BF-109, it has a separate frame for the cockpit, but in separate windows. Pretty clear, and they're pretty thick. Alright, so let me see the magnets. I don't know. Hold on. Let me get another one. Look how small this is, and yet look how thick the canopy is. So here's an IL-2, which I believe this person, one of these pilots, shot down an ME-262 with this flying tank thing. There we go. So Top Gun Chen knows this brittleness. Look how thick this is. In fact, I am curious. This plastic is 0.9 thickness. So yeah, once you get a 0.8 minimum, preferably 1 millimeter, and then yeah, the window is even thicker. So it's possible, clearly possible, 1.5 millimeters to have a nice thick window that holds its shape, and be clear. So this is impressive, very impressive. And it's just generally one piece, right? So it doesn't flex around because it's just one piece. These magnets, I'll have to deal with this later. Another 3D printer artist is Ships of Cats. So again, in this case, Ships of Cats just has one piece of clear plastic and then was painted. But look how thick this plastic is. It's over a millimeter. 1.6 is the thickest. 1.8. Yeah. So that's why it doesn't flex around. It keeps its shape because it has the material to do it. Whereas this thing is just a flexible mess with the brittleness of an eggshell. So, looking at the size here, right? This thing is huge. World War II plane is never going to be that big compared to a more modern jet fighter. So, I feel the scaling is its own entity. It's a absolutely massive model compared to the other ones. In fact, the wingspan of this is roughly 15 centimeters or 6 inches. So again, it's just a little bewildering to me that the body of this is so strong and thick, except for that antenna thing, or pitot tube thing. And the canopy and the landing gear are so thin and frail when it's a deformed design. If it's deformed, make it durable, right? This one literally has, thick metal rod and tubes for the thing sticking out of it. This thing was so small and thin, it flew off somewhere. It's gone forever. So it's a real shame. Or this one has a metal rod in it too, but it's actually embedded in the wing more. So that's a little... But it's clearly possible to make an airplane 3D printed, durable, and only this big. Like, look at the size difference, right? With a clear cockpit and a pilot that actually fits inside of it. So Dog Model Studio, I hate to knock on you, but you got to look at what these these other designers are doing, or just build a real model kit and realize this is way too delicate for the normal person. Here's a mass-produced thing, Hasegawa, the Zero, and although I rag on these cockpits all the time because they're difficult to paint, again, this is it's a millimeter thick because it's meant to be made by normal people, not people that have to wear microscopic magnifying glasses and have really, really high degrees of patience. I am genuinely shocked that I made this thing. I really am. It was just so difficult. So the one awesome thing is, look at it. If you're willing to take the time and you have the patience, this thing does look awesome. It was a no-brainer for me to buy this because it's the first, jet fighter in World War II, or first fighting jet in history. This designer does have two other designs that I can see on eBay, and they do look awesome. It's just that I don't know if I'm going to buy them because I have a suspicion I'm going to break it. And so that's not good for longevity and for collecting things that break so easily. So that's my warning to you guys. But if you've built, a few hundred model kits and you have a lot of patience, you can clearly get this to work. So go ahead and get it. It is very cool. It's very unique, that's for sure. And I do love it. It's really nice. Okay, so yeah, take it with a grain of salt. First, the information from Wikipedia, but second, is this going to be worth buying? Again, as I mentioned, it's kind of expensive, so ideally it would have just been designed better. Alright, well, thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next T-formed airplane video.